Brooklyn may always grow so proud and so beautiful with the help, of course, of immigrants who helped to form this country and certainly this municipality that we live in. So we're going to be talking about immigrants today. I'm going to take you into our first slide to find out about LPRs, lawful permanent residents. Now, as defined by our government, these are green card recipients, folks who are here as part of an immigration law, a person who's granted lawful permanent residence right here in the U.S. And as of 2015, the immigrant population was just over 43 million, comprising about 13% of the entire U.S. population, which is, of course, over 300 million folks. Now, that's the wide picture. Let's take a little bit of a deeper dive to find out who these lawful permanent residents are and where they hail from. So just over 1 million foreign nationals became lawful permanent residents as of 2015. So that year, the leading places of origin of their birth was Asia by about 40%, North America, of course, including our neighbors to the north in Canada, and those to the south in Mexico comprised 35% of those folks. So bringing it up to right now, I can show you some numbers from 2016. Over 700,000 folks were naturalized that year. 73% of those chose to reside in about 10 states that comprise most of the population. In descending order, we start with California. They love the sunshine, but the smart ones maybe came to New York. Florida also was in the top 10, and they go all the way in descending order down to around the nation's capital in Virginia and Maryland, mostly in coastal places, except for, where I hail from in Illinois, but we got a big old lake there. So this is showing a little bit of the distribution of folks who came to the U.S. and became lawful permanent residents, naturalized in 2016. So that's a look at some of the numbers, but we're going to get into some of the issues of folks who are LPRs living in America right now in the A block.
If you're a legal immigrant to this country and you leave to go overseas, will getting back in be a problem? If you're entitled to receive public assistance, could doing so lead to trouble, even deportation? Some documented immigrants have fallen victim to fraud. What kind of scams are being perpetrated? Just a few of the questions our guests can answer, but there are plenty more where they come from.
Joining us are Kavita Pawria-Sanchez, Assistant Commissioner for the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. Welcome to BK Live. And we also are happy to have Jennifer Williams with us. She's the Supervising Attorney in the Immigration Law Unit at the Legal Aid Society. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having us.
And finally, Dr. Tim Law is here. He's the Senior Consultant for CAS. That's the Chinese American Social Services Center.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you all here. I have to say that in the recent years since this new administration has come aboard, we've featured many people here on this show who've expressed concern about legal status. Should documented immigrants worry about coming back to the United States if they're traveling across from abroad?
Sure. So we are definitely hearing concerns about travel, and I think that's partially a result of the Muslim ban that the president signed at the beginning of the year. I'll start by saying that that ban is not in effect. So right now there is not a travel ban. It is tied up in the courts. Folks are fighting back very hard against this, and so there are lingering concerns even though that ban is not in effect. And what we advise is for individuals with specific concerns to seek out a trusted, safe immigration lawyer where they can get advice about their particular case. The city has an incredible program that we launched about a year ago called Action NYC. We provide free, safe, legal immigration services across the city at community-based locations in all 5 boroughs. The program, again, is called Action NYC, and you can call 311, say Action NYC or Immigration Legal Services, and get connected to a lawyer in your community.
So Jennifer, we look at people who are documented when they're crossing borders and taking flights and stuff, but there is, I don't want to say a hierarchy, but there's several steps on the way to being a to status adjustments and all of these things. So have you seen any of that, the strata along that way of concern, where people saying, I'm not really naturalized yet, but I have a status adjustment, or I'm temporarily here, sort of thing?
Right. Well, so as you know, the immigration law is extremely complicated and complex. So, if anyone has any questions, they absolutely need to speak to an experienced and reputable immigration attorney. So there are different concerns and fears that everyone is experiencing right now in all areas. In general, and again, this is not to take place of any real legal advice, a lawful permanent resident is free to leave and free to return to the United States if they do not have any criminal convictions. There are certain concerns if they stay outside of the country for 6 months or more, if they intend to naturalize down the road, become a naturalized U.S. citizen. And if there are any issues involving an arrest or criminal conviction, again, that is an extremely complex area of the law, and you absolutely need to speak with an experienced immigration attorney who understands that intersection of criminal and immigration law, because travel could trigger removal proceedings upon return.
Scary. Dr. Law, what are some of the most common questions, I guess, among documented immigrants during this current administration?
Okay.
And what are the common sources of misinformation?
Since January 2017, a lot of residents in our communities, certainly they ask me questions. Dr. Law, is the police going to come in to check on us, check our immigrant status? There's a lot of misunderstanding there. A lot of them, they don't want to go back to their country. Right. They said, if I go back there, I might not be allowed to come back here later on. So I told them that you don't have to worry about a thing unless you did something wrong. You're a lawful permanent resident here. You have the right to stay in the United States. That you mentioned before, gentlemen, it's a documented, it's not undocumented. There's a big difference between documented and undocumented, okay? If you live here long time, you're legal, you did everything, pay your tax, what do you have to worry about? Yeah. So some gentlemen work in a supermarket. One day I work in Bay Parkway in Brooklyn. Oh, there's a police coming to check on us. I better work in basement. I said, no, they don't check on us. One gentleman showed me the newspaper have a picture on it. I look at it. There's an ICE police. Yeah. I told them ICE police is different from NYPD police. Right. I always conduct workshop in our community. The captain always told us that. The NYPD police not asking your immigration status. Right. Don't worry about it.
So we know about this chilling effect, because even though that immigration policy never went into effect, we saw people going to JFK. We saw people being held up and didn't know their ultimate outcomes in some cases. So even though the law says one thing, there's this perception that it's a completely other, it's a different landscape if you are, whether you're permanent or have advanced parole, whatever it is, that you may not be able to come back.
Sure, and I think we have a lot of work to do to get the message out there to immigrant communities to counter this misinformation, these myths, while also being sure that we are not overstating the case, right? Overstating the case of safety. Right. Because some people do have legitimate risks. For example, as others shared, what if you've had some run-ins with the law? So we really do at this time advise that individuals seek out an immigration lawyer, a trusted, credible, experienced immigration lawyer. The city just invested a total of, in the coming year, we'll be investing $30 million in just immigration legal services alone. It's a historic investment because the mayor has understood that at this time, this is a very deep need in our communities to counter some of this misinformation.
You know, speaking of the community needs too, we've heard stories of people withdrawing from public assistance,
Absolutely.
whether it's like welfare or any rental things or any what some would call entitlement programs, because they fear it's going to put them on some sort of hit list, like they're going to be the bad immigrants who send back. So dispel that for us.
I am the council member, Coney Island Hospital. Okay, the staff member, Coney Island Hospital, told me that A lot of residents, they don't want to go to the hospital. I said, why? They worry about the staff. The hospital check on their check their the WIC program, food stamp, and the other benefits. I told them you had to explain to them the public hospital do not check anything like that. You just say you provide the information, your birthday, your address. That's all. They don't ask your immigrant status. Don't have to worry about the other thing.
Jennifer, can you explain what the difference is between the re-entry permit, advance parole, and a refugee travel document?
Sure. So there are a lot of nuances with all of these, so I'll speak just very generally about them. So if you're a lawful permanent resident and you travel abroad and you intend to stay outside of the country for 1 year or more, you just don't get to come back in, right? You're going, that card that is invalid for reentry. So you must apply for a reentry permit before you leave in advance of your travel so that you don't run into any issues returning back to the United States. For advance parole, again, just very generally speaking, there are a lot of nuances behind this. If you have an adjustment of status application pending before USCIS, and you wish to travel again abroad, you need to ask permission to come back to the United States. If you travel without seeking that permission, that advance parole, they're going to consider your application abandoned or withdrawn. Okay. And then lastly is the refugee permit. So those individuals who have been granted asylum or refugee status here in the United States, if they wish to travel abroad, maybe back to their home country, in lieu of a passport, in advance of their travel, they can get this document. But there's always concerns that if you're traveling back to the country from which you were seeking, asylum from, they may question a couple of, if they're going to look at your travel plans and and they could possibly terminate your asylee status if they see some sort of pattern that may show that there was fraud or there wasn't a real fear. So you have to be really careful about these things. And again, I'm going to say this over and over, you absolutely should speak to an experienced immigration attorney before you travel.
So Kavita, we know that there are experienced immigration attorneys out there, but there are also a lot of predatory people who are feeding off of the fears that people see in the headlines about what could happen to you. So how can we learn who's reputable and who is a person who is to be avoided?
Sure. So absolutely, there's a lot of unscrupulous behavior out there, particularly at this time where our communities are feeling particularly vulnerable. For example, we're hearing about phone and email solicitations to pay USCIS, or the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, through the phone via PayPal. The USCIS will never ask you to pay over the phone, right?
Well, where can people sort of report this fraud as
so
well?
Super important that we do report these instances so that we can get to the heart of the issue. And there are several ways to do that. The first place to start is the state runs a hotline through its Office of New Americans. They are a central location for collecting complaints and following up on them, taking the appropriate measures depending on what authority is involved. It may be a local criminal issue, it may be a state issue. So there's really a tremendous infrastructure in New York for reporting these complaints. At the local level, consumer issues can be reported to the Department of Consumer Affairs. You can start with 311. And where there's discrimination or harassment involved, we encourage individuals to report to the city's Commission on Human Rights, which also runs a hotline but can be accessed through 311. So lots of ways to report on fraud, and that it is very important that individuals are doing that at this time.
Dr. Law,
yes.
Have you seen, or would you say that there's sort of a rush maybe for citizenship?
Yes.
If for people that are documented this sort of limbo area, are they saying, hey, now's the time, let's push for our citizenship?
Yes. Recently, a lot of permanent residents talk to me. Dr. Law, I want to fill out the application form become the United States citizens.
So after all these years, they were fine with
certainly.
now...
A lot of permanent residents in my community, at least, I help them fill out at least 15 application form already. I don't charge them anything at all. I also set up the English class, teach them to practice those questions. Who is the president of the United States? Who is the governor of New York State? That kind of questions, so that they can pass the citizenship exam. So I want to point out that a lot of scam, that this lady talking about fraud, I'm talking about scam, okay? A lot of scam in our community. There's some agency, some company, whatever, they charge them $85 just to fill out the application form. Some of them charge you $100 fill out the application form. I joking with them. I help you to fill out application form. You just buy me a cup of coffee. Okay. I always tell them, if you want to get help, get the honest and the experienced the immigration lawyer. Don't get any other kind lawyer because they have a different kind. This lady is a lawyer. No, they have criminal lawyers. You have to retain called the immigration lawyer. The keywords are honest. Because those are some kind of agency, they said, I guarantee you get you a permanent resident card within 4 months or 1 year. Yeah. There's no guarantee at all. And then somebody said, I know somebody inside, okay, you pay me $4,000, $5,000. Yeah. I guarantee it. That's the keyword, guarantee. There's no such thing. I always tell them, I warn them, there's no guarantee at all in the United States. Everything you got to follow the proper legal procedure to get your permanent resident card, get your citizen paper. Also, I want to point out that our government, hopefully, they can help us. I set up 2 English classes to help them to practice those English already. Now, I don't have enough money. I use my own money, make copies, buy papers, stationery. Hopefully, state, city, federal government can allocate more money to us, could set up more English classes to help them.
So Dr. Law is doing his part out of his own pocketbook, but there are things that the city and the state and even the federal government have set up. So when are folks eligible to actually apply for these programs that will not put you at risk for being deported or any sort of immigration action if you are a lawful permanent resident? So when can people apply and get into that stream?
So just very generally speaking, we could really spend 20 minutes just talking about the naturalization process, but the individual must be lawfully admitted for permanent residence. They must be 18 years old. There are certain requirements under continuous residence and physical presence. There's a requirement of good moral character, 5 years preceding the date of their application. They must demonstrate knowledge of the English language. This is very elementary, but it can be very difficult for certain individuals. Also, knowledge of U.S. history and government. There's going to be a civics exam. And they must also be able to take an oath of allegiance. So the application process is through an N-400. There is a fee with that application. After they file their application, they'll have an interview with a USCIS officer. There'll be background checks capturing their fingerprints. So it's a process.
It is a process, and it all happens through the official U.S. government channels. There's no middle person who can speed that process for you.
No,
so
and anyone who's promising that,
walk
out
away.
the door
Call
as quickly as
311.
possible.
Yeah.
All right, we
But
thank
nothing
you
to
all
fear.
for being here. We appreciate your time.
Thank
you.